So we've had a few sermons on Proverbs recently. We're going to have one more next week. Then a Bible Day Camp themed sermon on June 9th that Barry Bovary will preach for us because I'll be out of town. We're going to our daughter's baby shower on June the 8th. We're excited about that. And when I get back on June the 16th, we're going to start a series on the prophet Amos. So yesterday I was doing all this work, and Monica did all this work, and I went out on the front porch, and we had these two light fixtures that had some sort of built-in LED panel, and when they go out, apparently you have to throw the whole thing away. So I bought some new light fixtures, and I worked really hard, and I did everything right. I connected the white to the white, and the black to the black, and the ground to the ground, and went over here and did it on that side, and I could not get those things to work. And I just thought, well, this is crazy. I thought, well, I don't know, maybe it's the light switch. So I went inside, and I didn't kill the breaker. I just left the light switch off, and I was pulling it out to see if all the wires, and I said, ouch! And Monica said, what's wrong? I said, well, the light switch works. And so at least I knew that wasn't the problem. And isn't that crazy sometimes? I did everything right, but it's not working. And, well, I talked to Keith this morning. He gave me a couple of ideas of what I might have done wrong. But here's the thing. Life is complicated. That's why you have wisdom. Wisdom is what you follow when there aren't rules to go by, or when you think you followed the rules and it's still not working right. And wisdom is something that you only gain through experience, and you know you've gained it when what you're doing works. If it doesn't work, you haven't figured it out yet. Ray Ortlund, who wrote a commentary on Proverbs, says this, that wisdom is when we outgrow our conceptions of how life should work. Well, it ought to work this way. I did all that right. It should work. But when it doesn't, then you learn how God actually built life to work, he says. Because God built all these principles into life, and he goes on to say, and work well. But it's sort of a secret you have to learn, and you learn it through trial and error, and that's how you become wise. And so it's when you learn to figure out how to make life work for you in all the places that you are, in all your relationships and in your work. And there's something that you can learn from God, and God built this wisdom, these spiritual principles into life. So today, we're going to talk about friendship, and we're going to talk about the wisdom that Proverbs and the Bible has about friendship. So we're going to start with this reading out of John chapter 15, verse 15.
No longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing. But I have called you friends, for all that I've heard from my Father I have made known to you.
Hey, I like that. Jesus says, I'm calling you a friend, not just a servant. When we're called into relationship with God, it's something beyond just being a servant. We are his servants, but he invites us into friendship through Jesus Christ. Now, there's a friendship that comes because he initiates it by sharing with us. But the friendship is a really important part of what we experience through Christ. Now, did you know the Pew Research surveys, they survey all these people, and that Americans say that, in fact, 61% of Americans say that a close friendship is more important than even marriage or children. Now, that's kind of hard for me to believe. Maybe they already have marriage and children, but I know one thing, that marriage and children is not enough for a person that doesn't have any friendships. It takes more than marriage and children, and 61% of Americans think that friendship is what that missing ingredient is. And Jesus says that he'll call us his friends. But it also, in that same survey and that research they did, said that 8% of Americans say they have 0% friends. 0. 30% say they have 2 friends or less. So friendship's not easy to come by. Listen to what Proverbs says in Proverbs 27, verse 10.
Better is a neighbor who is near than a brother who is far away.
Now, I love family. I'm always jealous of the Gillespie family. They have all these people here, and it's a close family. And I grew up in Brazil as a missionary kid, and so we were away from family. But you know what? We had a family. They were in Brazil. When we left, it was one of the hardest things that ever happened because that was our family. And as a minister, I've had to move a few times. Thank God I haven't had to move very many times because I've spent a lot of time at every church that I've been to. But every time we went to this church, we developed, Monica and I, a family. And family is something that has to be close to you. And it's better to have a neighbor close to you than a brother way off because we need somebody that will stand by our side. That's what true friendship is. And some of you may remember who Jackie Robinson was. He was a famous Brooklyn Dodger first baseman, played baseball, and Hall of Famer. But what made him really famous is he was the first African-American baseball player to get into the majors. And he faced all sorts of jeers everywhere he went because they didn't want him playing. And one day he was at home in Brooklyn and he made an error. He was the first baseman. And the crowd was just jeering and saying, "Get him out of here." And Pee Wee Reese, another Hall of Famer, walked right up to him, put his arm around Jackie Robinson and just stared at the crowd until they all shut up. And it turned the tide for him. Because after that time, they quit jeering him, and they started cheering him. And Jackie Robinson said, "I think I would have quit baseball if it hadn't have been for Pee Wee Reese. He saved my career." That's what a friend can do for you. Because a friend can stand by your side when you need them, but it's only going to happen if they're close to you. And so just a few points about friendship. The first is be a friend. They say that if you're looking for somebody to be friendly, you're going to have a hard time finding anybody. But if you're going out there and you're willing to be a friend to others, you're going to find plenty of friends. But you have to sometimes initiate that friendship. Listen to what it says in Proverbs 20, verse 6.
Many a man proclaims his own steadfast love, but a faithful man who can find?
Now, many a man says they'll be your friend. Many a person may say, "Well, I love you." But who can find somebody who really means it, who's faithful, who really follows through with it? That's the key. Paul tells us what friendship is not and what it is in 1 Thessalonians. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, beginning in verse 5, he says, here's what we did not do, because we were real friends. He said, we never came with words of flattery. We never came telling you something we didn't mean. What we told you, we were sincere about. And as you know, nor with a pretext for greed, God is our witness. And that word there is, in Greek, is pleonexias. And it's an interesting word because it means covetousness. It has kind of two meanings. One is covetousness. So he said, we didn't come wanting what you have. We weren't trying to be in competition with you or one up you or get something from you. And there's another meaning of it that says we weren't trying to get an advantage, kind of the same thing. We weren't trying to somehow get something from you or somehow compete with you. Instead, we just came to be your friend. And it goes on to say too, and we also weren't seeking glory from you. Though we could have had demands as an apostle, but instead he says we came and served you like a mother caring for her children. And so he said, we didn't come to get something from you. We didn't come to get satisfied from our relationship with you. We didn't come to try and get from you something that we knew we already needed to get from God. We came instead to give to you and to serve you. And that's what true friendship is. It's about caring for somebody and serving them and doing what's best for them. And of course, Jesus is the ultimate example of that. And in Philippians chapter 2, verse 3 through 6, it reminds us what Jesus did for us.
Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. Have this in mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped.
Jesus didn't come trying to act like he was better than anybody else. He just served others. He laid down his life for others. And so if you want friendship, you have to initiate by being a friend. And it's really important that you develop that friendship. And part of developing that friendship is you not only initiate it, but you share your life as a part of that friendship. Listen to what it says in Proverbs 18, verse 24.
A man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother.
So you can have a lot of people you know or say hi to or shake their hand, and it's good to know a lot of people. I'd like to memorize as many of your names as possible because I like you and I like getting to know you. But the truth is, all of us are only capable of a few really close friendships. That's just the way God made us. But if you're going to have those close friendships that are deep, then you have to be willing to share your life with others. You have to kind of invest into others. And when you do that, here's what Paul says in 1 Thessalonians 2, verse 8, continuing this passage. He says, so, being affectionately desirous of you, we were ready to share with you not only the gospel of God, but also our own selves because you had become very dear to us. He says, hey, we were willing to share our life with you. Part of friendship is we share our life. We share our thoughts. We share our fears. We share our aspirations. We share our hurts. We share our needs with each other. And so being a friend is something that requires vulnerability. Now, you have to be careful about who you're vulnerable with. I heard the story about this farmer who went out, and there were these crows that kept pestering some of his crops, so he went out with a shotgun one day and just shot them. And he walked over there, but mixed in with those crows was his parrot. And he grabbed his parrot and took it back to the house, and his son said, Dad, what'd you do? He said, well, he just hung out with the wrong crowd. And so you have to be careful. Some people will turn on you. You're not supposed to cast your pearls before swine, but you need to find somebody you can trust. Because if you don't trust anybody, you won't have a deep friendship. You need to find somebody that you're willing to be vulnerable with, somebody that you're willing to invest in, somebody that you're willing to spend time with. And you think about it. Y'all are, I'm speaking to the in crowd here. I'm preaching to the people that already believe this, but when you have a wedding, who do you invite? You invite your friends. And my goodness, how many of those friends are church friends? Many of them. You have a baby shower, and who do you invite? And I know somebody having a baby shower, they don't go to church, and it's a pain because they're having to plan their own baby shower, and they don't have anybody hardly to come to it. But when you're a member of a faith community, we all get around each other, and we have baby showers together, and we help each other make decisions. And funerals are one of the things that hits me because when you go to a funeral from somebody that is part of a community of faith, and I think that this is how God, by the way, planned it. He planned his church so that we could have friendships and family in this community of faith. And when you have a funeral, there's nothing that's more black and white to me than people that don't go to church and their funeral and people who go to church. I mean, you talk about such a stark contrast, but we share life together as a body because we're united as family in Christ and we're friends. with Jesus and we're friends with each other. And so we're meant to share our life together. God created us to share our life together, but when we isolate ourselves off to our own somewhere, we end up without anybody. And some of the saddest funerals that I've done are funerals where I went, there was hardly anybody there, and they weren't Christians. It was a hard funeral to do. But we're created to share life together. It's the way God made us to be. And so another thing that you have to do is, friends, is you have to be honest. Listen to what it says in Proverbs 27, verse 6.
Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Profuse are the kisses of an enemy.
So just because they're kissing you doesn't mean they like you. And young women, just because he's kissing you doesn't mean he loves you. He may just be out for something. You know what? What's really faithful, though, are the wounds of a friend. I will tell you, one of the best rewards of my life has been my 35-and-a-half-year marriage with Monica. But that doesn't mean it's all been easy. And there have been times where each of us have wounded each other because we needed to, because we had to be honest with each other. Some people think that a great marriage is 100% agreement. No, a great marriage is 100% love and support, but not 100% agreement. It means that sometimes we have to be willing to be honest with each other. Now, don't nitpick. That gets me in all sorts of trouble. Don't nitpick. But sometimes she's had to stand up to me and tell me some things that wounded me, that was a little bit hard for me to hear. But there's an old Jewish proverb that says, a friend is someone that will warn you. If you see somebody heading off a cliff and you don't warn them, that's not much of a friendship. A friend will tell you the truth when it's hard to do. In Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24, the writer says this about warning.
And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works.
Now, that word there, stir, is paroxysmon. And if you look at that word in the Greek, it actually means to jab someone or to cut them. It's kind of like that shock I got on my light switch yesterday. It creates a reaction. And so whoever wrote Hebrews is saying, hey, sometimes we need to shock each other. We need to jab each other. We need to stir each other up. And he's going to go on to say to good works, but then he goes on and saying, and don't neglect meeting together as some of you are doing. He warns them. And so in a real friendship, we take the risk sometimes to be honest, even if it threatens the friendship, because we care enough about the person to be honest. And so a real friendship requires honesty. It's not a real friendship if you avoid all the hard talks. It's not a real friendship if you watch somebody harm themselves and don't warn them. And so part of having a good friendship is having a friend that is honest enough to tell you what you need to hear, and a friend that you're willing to listen to them about what they need to tell you. And so it's important that in a real friendship, we're honest with each other. Now, realize this, there's a difference between feeling loved and being loved. Sometimes just because you don't feel real good about what was said to you doesn't mean you aren't being loved. Because sometimes real love hurts because it needs to. So friendship. So important we value friendships. And, you know, it's kind of like a church. I'm sure you've heard this. There's no perfect churches. And if there is one, as soon as you get there, it won't be perfect anymore. Well, that's kind of how a friendship is. There's no such thing as a perfect friendship. And if there is, as soon as you're a part of it, it won't be perfect anymore. I mean, there's just no perfect people. I was at a fair with Monica. I can't remember if we were already married or we were just dating. We might have just been dating. It was 4th Avenue Fair, and we were walking around at this fair, and all of a sudden there was this big dog that scared me. It was kind of zipping by me, and I thought it was coming after me, but no, it was just kind of running around, and all of a sudden I noticed that my watch was reflecting a light, and it was chasing my light off my watch. And I had the best time running that big dog into people and into the wall and watching him jump on the wall. It was a lot of fun. Kind of crazy dog. But sometimes I think we're like that in our life. We kind of get focused on the wrong thing. And a lot of times it's false. And we get focused on faults, and everywhere we are, we can see what's wrong, and we can see what could be done better, and we can see how things could be improved. And if that's the light you're chasing, you're going to run into a lot of people the wrong way. You're going to run into some walls the same way that dog was doing. Because what God wants us to do is to show each other grace. And here's what it says in Proverbs chapter 17, verse 9.
Whoever covers an offense seeks love, but he who repeats a matter separates close friends.
So a lot of friendship is just being graceful to each other. It's loving each other in spite of each other's faults. Nobody is perfect. And so it's important that as a part of our life that we learn to build each other up, that we learn to overlook offenses. There's so many offenses that in the big picture, they just aren't that big a deal. When you're thinking about life and death, some things aren't that big a deal. And so it's important as we learn about friendship and we seek God's wisdom in friendship that we initiate being a friend. That we're willing to share our life and be vulnerable with others, be close to others, that we're willing to be honest and receive honesty in return, and that we're willing to show grace. And the rest of it, we leave to God. We're not in control of everything. There's a lot of things that we leave to God. I've sat around, though, a long time wondering, why some people form friendships easier than others. And I think sometimes we don't form friendships because friendship is about giving, and sometimes it's hard to give when you just feel like you're lacking. Sometimes it's hard to serve others when you feel like you have so many people that haven't served you. Sometimes it feels like it's hard to love others when you feel like you haven't received love. Sometimes it's hard to forgive others when you still feel wounded. Sometimes it's hard to be a friend when you feel like you have no friends. I keep thinking about people that do for others. And by the way, I got my red, white, and blue on today. My wife made sure I had that on. Her biological dad and stepdad both served in the military, and I'm grateful to people that gave their life so we can live here in freedom. I'm grateful for that. They aren't my God, and in today's political world, I'm so confused, I don't even want to talk about politics. I'm hoping Jesus will come back before the next election. I'm praying for him, It's my hope. But you know what? Who I even admire more than people that have gone in the service, and I admire them and appreciate the freedoms that we enjoy because of them, is this person right here. Listen to John 15, verse 13.
Greater love has no one than this, that someone lay down his life for his friends.
What greater love is that than Jesus laid down his life for you? He did it so you could be healed. He did it so that you would have a friend. He did it so that you would know what real love was. He did it so that you could have a relationship with God. He did it so that you could be full of his Holy Spirit. And I've learned you can't be a friend until you've received the grace that comes from Jesus Christ, not the type of friend you want to be. And that's where it starts. So as you go through this Memorial Day, we got our flag flying outside. We're grateful, but remember, don't forget the cross, because he's your greatest friend.